Hey there. As usual, this is for entertainment purposes only. Take what you want from the videos and leave the rest for other people. So I was off to one of the most globally recognized spiritual schools in the globe, Arthur Findlay. It was a tight turnaround, and I was headed from Costa Rica, staying overnight in DC on the way. Tickets just worked out that way, and then flying out to the UK the very next day. The class was starting actually the night that I would arrive, and while I knew I'd be jet lagged, I was super excited to get this done. As I told you in the last video, I wanted to prove to myself that me having this download stuff just meant I was emotionally spent with everything that had happened and really was BS no matter what I'd found in my quick Googling. You know, that MBA brain thing. Because I was also on a mission to clean up my own ish, I decided to call two very important women in my life on my way when I was in DC overnight. I hadn't talked to either of them in a while. Both relationships, sorry, having trouble talking today. Both relationships were pretty strained for very different reasons. And given they both meant a lot to me, I felt like it was high time to reach out. Well, I hadn't really had a fight with either of them. I just hadn't reached out to them, and they hadn't reached out to me. And my ego had previously told me that it was time for them to step up, and I felt like they hadn't been that active in checking out if I was okay. So I just didn't reach out and let the silence take over for months. I decided it was fine time to fix that. The first one I reached out to had been one of my best friends for years. When I say years, I mean, God, 15 years. She really meant a lot to me. We had both worked together and spent years with each other. She welcomed me into her family and was really, really my heart. Over the years, I was so grateful for our friendship, for her love, her wisdom. And then our friendship seemed to fade as we were at different points in our lives. I was still working and she was retired and traveling, and it just seemed that we grew further and further apart. I think she got frustrated with me that I couldn't play more, and I got frustrated with her understanding that I just couldn't. And we weren't as tight. We were just living two separate lives. And then COVID hit, and I totally underestimated the effects of having different viewpoints on it. I just thought we were okay to disagree. She was super frustrated with me. And so we grew apart even more, and I just left it that way. So as I stayed overnight in DC, I called her to reconnect and to get our friendship back on track. It was amazing catching up on life as we both shared intimate details on how we were doing. We always had those kinds of relationships where, it just clicks. You can talk to each other or not talk to each other for a long time, and we can just catch up like it was nothing. While we didn't regain the closeness we once shared, it really warmed my heart catching up with her and not letting the silence remain. It was great. It lasted for hours. And then I knew I needed to make a second call that, frankly, I was dreading. My second call was to a woman that I loved dearly. I grew up with her, and she was someone who, when I was young, was always my hero and my confidant. And then in my earlier adult years, I was still super close to her, and she was still my confidant. But I realized literally that we're as different as night and day. You take any topic, and I mean any topic, and we'll feel completely opposite about it. And the problem is she just didn't understand my perspective on life, ever. She just thought I was trying to be different. But given the relationship was super important to me, I just wasn't willing to cut her off for the rest of my life. I needed to figure out a way to have a better relationship, more reciprocity, more truth, and understanding between us. So I called her, and for the very first time, I told her in full detail how what she said to me at very important times in my life hurt me very deeply. I wanted her to understand that I was not her, and that she needed to accept me fully for me. And I needed to speak the truth about boundaries of what I was willing and not willing to accept in what she said to me. I'm coming completely from my perspective here, and I know she felt very differently and has a very different take on this, but I'm telling you this story through my lens. Every time that I had something exciting happening in my life, she would make a shitty comment to me, or I would feel completely unsupported when I shared it. She would say something that made me feel small, or condescended to, or judged. Now, she's a little bit older than me, but there were so many times that what came out of her mouth just immediately deflated my bubble upon sharing my news. Just to share a couple examples, when I passed the Foreign Service Officer exam for the State Department, I shared it with her. And what came out of her mouth was, dress like her, not me, for the interviews, inferring that I dressed like a proverbial hooker, even though I wore suits at that time every day of my life and worked for a governmental relations office that dealt with politicians all day long. And she had no clue what I looked like when I was working. Or another time when I get selected among the thousands of applicants to submit a full NSF grant, which I've shared with you, for R&D, when it was completely out of my wheelhouse. And I was so excited about being selected to submit the full grant. And she said, "Oh, that's good. I had a really shitty day." And then continued on about her day for the next 45 minutes. I just didn't feel heard. Or asked me 6,000 times, it feels like, why I went to Mongolia. She was pissed about it. Or why am I a full-time digital nomad? Or basically anything about my life. It's the complete opposite of her, or what she wants in her life, or what's important to her. What truly defines how different we are at our core is our going joke about hotels. Give her the Ritz-Carlton anywhere, and it will be her dream scenario. Me, on the other hand, give me a $20 hotel room with a hot shower and a functional bed in some exotic locale, and that's my dream scenario. There's so many examples throughout life that I shared with her where she took my excitement and just made me feel like shit. It's just we're two completely different people, and the hotel thing is just an example of night and day. And I'm not going to lie to you. When I called her, that conversation was super hard. We talked for hours, and in the beginning, it wasn't very pleasant. And then as we talked through each of the examples and our different perspectives of them, I began to really realize some very important things. I realized that her intent was not to condescend to me. I realized what she was saying to me, she was saying it out of love. She says that I'm too sensitive, and she's right about one thing. I am super sensitive about all these things. And what I realized in talking to her is because I didn't love myself. I was looking for external validation from her because she meant so much to me and means so much to me. And then I kept getting disappointed by the way she was communicating her love for me. What I realized as we were talking is she wasn't saying things like I would say it. And I was taking everything she said through my lens when she was completely different than me. And while she didn't completely understand my perspective either, we agreed to meet halfway. What I realized was we're two very different human beings who love each other very much, but we're never going to see eye to eye. And candidly, on probably anything. We had to agree to set up respectful boundaries and to start a new relationship filled with much more mutual understanding for both of us. And while I was exhausted at the end of the conversation because of all the emotions, the initial fighting, and then the mediated better understanding, I was so glad that I had it. I had a better understanding of her and her intents. I also had a better understanding of me and the shadow work that I needed to continue to do from the hurts that I still had to process. And I had a better understanding of how much I had already grown in my self-love and self-acceptance. Even the fact that I had the conversation is transparent with the examples that I shared and how I shared my emotions. I was learning to set boundaries with people that were important to me. And I knew while not everyone was coming with me into my future journeys, those two relationships with these two important women in my life were really cherished by me. And what I realized was they were worth fighting for, to be better and to do better. And so with important work under my belt, I was headed off to the UK the next morning. And when you listen to this story, everybody's relationship is super different. And as this journey unfolds and I share more videos, I'll talk about other relationships. But the reality is, I found that it's very important to evaluate your own relationships to help them to grow and evolve for you. While mine are still a work in process, transparency and mutual respect I found are never wrong. And being true to myself and radical acceptance of myself is never wrong. What I found is there's relationships that just aren't worth saving due to rampant toxicity, old paradigms, old family dynamics. But there are some that are salvageable by trying to take the ego out of it and just trying to fill the conversation with mutual, unconditional love and respect. Until next time, I'll talk to you from the story about the UK.